Hi guys, welcome back to the Train Brave podcast. I'm Renee McGregor.
And I'm Chris Hendy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit more about our philosophy, which is about creating sustainable athletes. Both Chris and I have become really aware that during these difficult and challenging times of the lockdown, um, I think a lot of people's balance and ability to be rational about their training has gone out the window. So we just want to talk about how what you're doing now could potentially have really negative consequences on when we are out of this situation, and actually a race may be quite soon on the horizon.
Yeah, I think it's kind of trying to kind of future-proof ourselves a little bit here because a lot of people are obviously dealing with their emotions, and everyone's got obviously a different emotional state right now. Everyone's kind of going through these kind of different states of emotions, anxiety, kind of anger, um, you know, potentially depression, whatever, and I think we've got to. And obviously, a coping mechanism for a lot of us, especially a lot of people listening, is to train. To kind of sweat it out, stress it out, kind of, just whether it's a bodyweight circuit in the living room, or it's going for that long run, or it's getting on the turbo and smashing out some mileage on the bike. Either way, people are training. Well, I know you are. You're training 6 to 7 days a week, potentially multiple efforts, two different sessions away. And I get it, and we get it, and we talk about this a lot, don't we? We get it. We understand why you're doing it, but guys, you've got to understand. Obviously, there's this. Is it sustainable? No. Is it? Would you be doing this if you're back? In the if you're at work? No. Because you wouldn't have that time. And you've got to think about the consequences of that. And I think that's what we want to kind of dive into a little bit today, about maybe working out what it should look like, and other coping mechanisms you could be using to kind of get through these uncertain times.
I think the other thing I want to highlight is obviously we also are probably slightly more sensitive and slightly more focused on comparisons, because a lot of people have signed up to like the e-gaming type sites, where they're racing against each other virtually. A lot of people are doing virtual runs and virtual kind of training sessions online, and everybody's documenting it, everybody's talking about it on Instagram. And I said to you this morning, I don't like Sundays at the best of times on Instagram, because obviously I follow a lot of runners, and do I need to know they've done 22 miles? No, not really. Like, I'm glad that they're happy with what they've achieved, but do we need to be telling people how much mileage we're doing? I don't think that's necessary, because I know from a fact, particularly the people that follow me, that they will want to kind of match what I'm doing. And we're all in very different situations, physically, mentally, lifestyle point of view. Like, one of the things I've had to really juggle is we're only allowed out once a day at the moment, and I have a dog. So for me, like, my running has become also the dog's exercise. And in a normal week pre-lockdown, I would run with baby a couple of times a week, but that would have been like my really easy recovery run. It wouldn't have been anything kind of useful, to be honest, but it would be more about him. And so I'd be quite relaxed about it, because like, if we stop and he sniffs and he jumps in the river, that's all good for me, because it's not about me, it's about him. But having to use my daily token as a way of exercising him and myself has actually proved incredibly challenging. um, so I just kind of wonder how people think about that, because I know a lot of people are maybe in different situations to me, and they've got partners who can help them with their dogs. They've got, maybe they don't feel they should be sticking to the once a day rule because they've got a dog. I don't know. I feel really strongly about it. And we were also saying earlier, I actually really struggle with going out for too long because I
Yeah,
feel guilty.
yeah, I think that's an interesting one because it's how it's perceived and what because obviously we in the endurance world, it's like, well, one run could mean 20 miles, could mean 30 miles. Let's go out for 4 hours. It's we know that we're not dealing with just a 5K run round trip, which has kind of gone viral recently. Is this whole 5K kind of thing, but we're dealing with people who are kind of, and I know that are going out for 20 plus miles. They're out for a couple of hours, and there's that whole thing. Is that right? Are they kind of taking the mick a little bit? But I don't think we're in a place to kind of really say whether it is or it isn't. But it's that perception. And I think the one thing you missed earlier on, wanted to bring up, was where people are geographically. I think everyone's very differently. I know that I work with lots of people who are live in different environments. Some live in the cities, some live in the country. Rural environment is very different to obviously the city environment. So those pressures, can you imagine looking at someone's account and seeing that they're out doing a 20-mile country run, and you're stuck in a flat, and you've only got the park to play in, and so it's kind of for me, I know I'm very aware of trying not to talk too much about what I'm doing, because I'm aware that a lot of people follow me. I don't want to put those kind of unfair pressures on, or make them feel guilty, or makes them feel like they're because they don't have that environment to play in at the moment. So there's a lot of consequences at the moment to to our actions. And I just I think it's very individual as to how people are going to be kind of dealing with it.
Yeah, I think it depends on you as a person, right? Like, I was talking to a friend last night, and we were just talking generally about people's behaviors and the consequences of people's behaviors, not in a sporting context, just generally in life. And we've both experienced situations recently where we can't quite get our head around somebody else's behavior, because it's not how we would behave, or we would ever accept that behavior. And yet, for those individuals, because of their personality type, they're able to just kind of validate and justify their behavior. And I think that's something that, obviously, because of who I am and because of my job and everything else, it's my strength, because I do think about my behavior and I think about my responsibility to the people that look up to me. And I do take that incredibly seriously. But it can also be my weakness, I guess, because sometimes it means I don't necessarily protect myself enough in that situation. And maybe I don't put myself first. So I guess, I'm just putting that out there so people can have a think about that. But I've always said this, and I will say it again and again and again, particularly about social media. As soon as you have a following, you have a responsibility. And I think you have to be incredibly careful. You can sit there and think, oh no, but I don't have that kind of following. Actually, you have no idea. Like, I know I've got a big following, and I have no idea who everybody is who follows me. I have a lot of interaction, and I will always respond to everybody that messages me. But I don't know a lot of you very well and what's going on for you, but I always try and put out content thinking that you're following me for a particular reason. So I keep my message on brand, shall we say, or on philosophy. And you're the same with your content.
This is a really interesting point, because right now everyone's phones are in their hands, they're in front of their laptops all the time at the moment, and that this comparison is very powerful, and that position of power people are in. People are wielding it recklessly right now. And for me, obviously, in the training world, like, this is one of the biggest issues right now, obviously, in our industry, is where people are just wielding this for fun. I've got people jumping up trying to help people by pushing them into these high intensity training sessions and etc. But, like, for instance, you won't see on my account, you won't see me doing that type of training. If I'm doing it quietly, because I know I'm doing it in minimal doses, because, like, I know who I'm dealing with. I know the people I want, who are kind of following to a certain degree. I know that I need to be, what you need to be doing is doing those basics exceptionally well. Like, you need to be working on doing those simple things, working on single leg strength, core strength, but you're not doing it in high intensity loads. You're not doing it recklessly. You're not doing too much of it. Again, I'm aware of who's listening, who's watching, because I respect that. I respect the people who are watching us. And if you don't, and that's what we're dealing with right now, is that people aren't really respecting that. They're just trying to get likes. They're just trying to. Do we want to talk about this whole thing, running around the garden? High volume of running around the garden right now.
Right. I'm going to just have one little thing, because so we are In a situation that we're in, we have a pandemic, global pandemic going on. And I know people want to do things, they want to raise money, they want to create some noise around what they're doing. And I appreciate a lot of us were in the middle of a training block ready for a major race. Like I would have just got back from Nepal today. Like today would have been my first day back at work after 2 weeks in the mountains, covering a lot of terrain. And so that, that my whole kind of beginning of this year has all been the build up to that point. Now, it's always disappointing when you can't do the race that you want to do for whatever reason. Obviously, this is just one example at the moment that a lot of races have been cancelled, but sometimes you can't do the race you want to do. And it's always disappointing. But again, I need to discuss the whole point of why do you need to then prove yourself in any other way? So there's a lot of people who are running around their garden or running around their houses, like covering 100 miles. I mean, firstly, mentally, why you want to do that to yourself, I have no idea. But secondly, we should all be looking after ourselves right now, right? Like one of the things that I keep banging on about, and I don't know why people are not listening, is that if you look at all the national governing bodies in this country, and I can't speak for other countries, but I know all the national governing bodies in this country have sent letters out to their athletes saying, this is not a time to be pushing your immune system. This is not a time to be doing high intensity training. This is a time to be looking after yourself, ensuring you're getting good sleep, good nutrition, good hydration, good rest, training at a moderate intensity. Because when you push yourself hard or you push yourself long, you are creating a potential for a depressed immune system in a situation where we are already under huge amount of threat from this virus. So I genuinely can't understand why anybody wants to keep pushing themselves with that threat that's hanging over us.
It's that community. Well, it's a community pressures, isn't it? To feel like you have to kind of, these things start to snowball, and you feel like you have to kind of jump in. And again, it's about social media. It's the likes, it's the follows, it's etc. etc. But as a coach to an athlete, as a responsible coach, you should be, and that's what a lot of you should make sure that you're having open dialogue with your coaches, because if you have a coach, they're not going to be, they shouldn't be obviously allowing you to do that to a certain degree, because this right now is a time for preservation. It's for maintenance, for, like you should be looking at, working on their areas of weakness, but you shouldn't be looking to peak. There's no peak performance happening right now. There's no athlete in this world that is looking to peak right now. So if you're expending yourself to those limits, you're only going to suffer in the long term. Whether you are training 7 days a week, you're putting in those 100+ miles a week, that's happening. I know that's happening because I'm talking to those individuals. But they are having deload weeks. So if they are doing that, there's a cycle. They're in the middle of a cycle, but a lot of you aren't doing that, and you're you're redlining it. You really are pushing the envelope right now. And as Rini says, your immune system you'll be making yourself way more susceptible, not only to disease, but definitely injury, overtraining, demotivation. You want to come out of this block. This is a form of training block. Yeah, we've got another month of this. Like if you're working on maintenance or training, you're working on developing strengths to areas of weakness, you want to come out of this ready, raring to go, not so tired, demotivated, sick, injured. There's so much, there's so much potential at the end of this block that, we want to hit the ground running.
The other thing I'm just going to jump in on, and I think you've done this really, really well with your online sessions, but obviously there's a lot of people doing online sessions at the moment, online HIIT training, online body weight stuff. And again, we are in this situation where you don't always know who's going to log on to your session. I think you do, because you have a system, which is great. And why I'm saying this, I want if we have got any personal trainers or anybody following us who is doing this, please be mindful that there's going to be a lot of new people who've never really done the types of exercise that you're doing. They may not have ever lifted a weight before. They may never have done a press up before, or, they may never have given themselves high intensity workouts. And again, it's difficult. I was saying to you this morning, wasn't I? I'm sort of being very cautious about what I do on my own without your supervision, because even though as you feel, you're very confident in my ability with weights and kettlebells and movement, but I'm very, very cautious that I don't want to get an injury right now. I don't want to lift something wrong. I don't want to, pull a muscle because I've tried to overreach myself to do something weird and wonderful. So if I'm honest, I'm not going online and following loads of people because I don't, I guess I've never done their classes before. So why would I suddenly start without knowing how to do those classes properly? If that makes any sense at all.
Well, here's a question you didn't bring up, was how many sessions people are doing a day. Like,
Wow.
that's the big thing. We're asking our guys is, we did a discussion group just before we got going this morning, and as in, how many sessions are we doing today, guys? Like, let's make sure obviously that we're doing, we're doing X in today's session. So if you are thinking about going for that run or that long walk, let's make sure there's a good gap. Let's make sure there's breakfast in there. We're making sure that those things, because I know the type of people we're working with who are happy to train. They'll train, and we know there's a few people listening to this and who we work with who are happy to do 2 or 3 sessions a day.
Yeah.
And again, you're going down a path there which is only going to lead to the obvious, injuries, overtraining, etc. So, as Rini says, you've really got to be aware of who you're working with and respect the fact that those people, might be overtraining daily.
I think so something that's really horrified me, and I'm just going to be honest about it. And it's, these are people I work with, these are people I know. But what's really horrified me is individuals that are actually incredibly unwell. So I'm not just talking about athletes with RED-S, I'm talking about people who are underweight and really shouldn't be doing any sort of form of training at all, but are now pushing themselves because in some ways being given that token of exercise a day outside, they're like, well, I need to do it. I need to get out on my bike for 2 hours or 3 hours. I need to go for a run for 2 hours. And I spoke to a few of my clients last week who I have advised should not be training, but I can only advise, I can't stop people. And just to make it very clear, Chris knows this about me, I rarely stop people from training because I know how it mentally can affect individuals. I only do it in cases where I am incredibly concerned about their physical well-being, so that they're at risk of cardiac arrest or collapse or something even worse. So that's where I would stop it potentially. And a couple of people admitted to me last week that they were doing 4 hours of training a day.
So this is what the people have got to do, right? In terms of action plan, guys. So what should you be doing? How are you going about things? First of all, what were you doing prior to this? Before this all happens, what did your training program look like? What were you doing as a form of exercise, training? What was your training volume? What was your training in frequency? Like, how often were you doing it? That shouldn't be any different from right now. Like, you shouldn't. And if you are changing, we never change anything by more than 10%, right? We never increase that intensity, the volume, by more than 10% on a weekly, if not monthly basis, because we never want to ramp things up. Because as soon as we ramp the intensity of anything up, you're asking a lot more of your body, you're asking a lot more of your systems, and you've got to force them into positions of collapse. So, first of all, what were you doing prior to this? And it shouldn't be that much different right now. We're only, how long? 6 weeks into this now?
5 weeks now. I think we're in week 5. Yeah.
So you're a month down the line. Okay, you're a month into your program. So there shouldn't be a great deal of difference. If you're looking at your timetable right now and you put it next to your previous timetable, and you've gone from 1 session a day or doing maybe 45 minutes to an hour to suddenly now doing 2 sessions, which are now equate to 3.5 hours of work or 4 hours of work, or the intensity is twice that. What is that doing? Multiply that by 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. You are ramping the volume up 50%, 60%, 70%. Guys, that's the first and foremost. That's the first thing you've got to be doing. All right. You've got to be looking at that comparison and going, okay, that's not smart. That's not logical. That's not a logical progression to have made. So that's what we're kind of worried about. And that's what we're hearing right now. So what would be logical for you would be to look at that previous timetable and go, okay, what I want to do a little bit more. but I need to make sure it's not excessively more than my body can handle. So across that week, again, going back to what we do in our sessions, we do across the 5 days, the 5 weekdays, we only do 30 to 40 minutes of work in the session. So the sessions are only 30 to 40 minutes in length. But we also have a thorough warm up. We get some good movement going on. So we look at some skill work based, some strength work based work. But then we'll get into our high intensity little circuit or some form of little workout towards the end of 3 of those 5 sessions. So we'll look at a conditioning day on the Monday. We'll then go into a strength focus on a Tuesday, conditioning, strength, conditioning. So we can like to alternate it, because we do not want to be ramping anything up right now. Like, we want to be looking to maintain things. We want to keep things relatively entertaining, to keep us sane, keep it fun. But essentially, the workload I cannot afford to overload my guys and girls that we're working with, because I know that they're probably going for a little run later on. When I say little, probably they're long, but all I'm thinking about is I cannot afford for them to be ramping up the overall workload, their overall volume, their overall intensity more than 10%, 15%. Because even though we might be doing a bit more rest, you're still going to be shocking your body to the point where it's going to break if you keep maintaining that. Okay, and then we make sure that we don't train at the weekends. I say to them, go for a long walk with the family, go for that long run if you want to, but we dial back the intensity, so you're not hammering that high intensity strength work 5-7 days a week. So just food for thought, guys. But in terms of how I want you to think about it, step back, put it onto paper in front of you, and go, okay, what was I doing? What am I doing now? Is it excessive? Probably. Dial it back, because although you're getting away with it right now, that's the truth of it. You're getting away with it. And if you blow up with an injury in a week, a month, 2 months time, it's because of this block you're doing right now, or you're flogging it, that you're gonna have the repercussions of it.
The other thing I'm going to jump in here and say also, this situation we're in is not permanent. No. And at some point, life will return, maybe slowly, but it will return back to normal. Like, we will go back to work, and we will start to interact back into, into society norms. Can you sustain what you're doing now when that happens? Like, that's something I have used myself. Like, I've been like, well, I could do another session today because I couldn't get out for my run. So I could do another gym-based session at home, or, whatever. And then I'm like, is that really going to benefit me in any formal manner? Because I know that once I go back to work, once the clinic opens again and we're back in the clinic, I know what my weeks are like. We know what my days are like. They're insane. They're long and they're busy, and I wouldn't be able to fit all that in. And something about the mentality that a lot of us are, particularly obsessive compulsive mentalities like myself, is that we're very good at creating new routines that we then feel we have to maintain. So especially like that eating disorder mindset particularly is very black and white. So if you've done something one day, you then feel you have to continue to do it because that's become the new norm. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, mentally, I am very, very worried about people who do have slight disordered eating disorder tendencies, because you are probably setting yourself up to go backwards 6 months if you continue in this way. I know it's hard right now. I get people are bored. I get people are trying to fill up time, particularly if you aren't able to work at the moment because your job has been postponed or stopped or whatever. I get that people are feeling uncomfortable, and perhaps if you're in a family environment, tensions are now starting to kind of rise a little bit. I get all that. I understand all of that. In the same way, when you are an individual on your own, the element of loneliness is probably starting to become a big thing. That isolation is becoming a big, big thing. And that does set up, what I'm trying to explain is, it does set up this real feeling of wanting to escape. I said it to a friend the other day. It was the day that my laptop died because I'd spilled coffee on it. And she rang me, and I had a full-on meltdown. which sounds ridiculous because it's just about a laptop, but it wasn't. It was actually everything that had happened in the previous few weeks. And basically, I just said to her, I can't do this. Like, I felt that incredible, overwhelming need to just escape because I couldn't handle any more. And what I couldn't handle was the isolation, the confinement, the difficult situation I was in. And I wanted to escape. Now, I know that that's what I would have felt previously, years and years and years ago. And I would have gone out and pushed and pushed and pushed from a physical point of view. Yeah. And I would have restricted my intake. Now, I know that's not the answer, so I haven't done either of those, just making that incredibly clear. If anything, I've actually dialed my mileage right down in recent weeks. And I want people to understand that it's okay to feel like that. Like, I get it. I understand that restlessness that you're probably experiencing. And then what do you do with that restlessness? You go and train. Now, something you need to be mindful of is that if you develop an exercise dependency, every time you train, you're obviously creating more and more dopamine in your brain. And so you end up potentially flooding your brain full of dopamine. Now, while you might think, well, that's great because dopamine's good and it makes us feel good, if you flood your brain full of dopamine, or you flood your brain full of any neurotransmitter because you're overdoing something, it will switch off another part of the brain. So what we know about dopamine is if you, especially when exercise dependency, or even like when you're looking at alcohol abuse or drug abuse, it's the same process, is that when that frontal part of the brain is flooded with dopamine, it affects the midbrain, which means the midbrain, which is used for evaluating threat, it doesn't switch on. So you do not see that your behavior is a problem, and yet it is a problem. So this is not just about the physical, it's also the mental side of it. Like, it's really important to understand that, yes, we all need a bit of fresh air. We all need a little bit of movement daily for our mental health. But you push it too far, and actually that will become dysfunctional as well.
We talk about sustainability right at the beginning of this, and it's obviously what we're kind of passionate about. I think as a coach, like, it's about longevity, wellness, this kind of being in the game for long term. And a lot of people we work with have put themselves on such a back foot that they can't run anymore. They can't train anymore. They put themselves in such a hole that they are now working very hard to come out and try and get out that hole, and just to get back to some very, very simple, very short distance running or some basic activity. And this is where this is all coming from. This is where all this passion comes from, for me and you especially, is that all I care about is that the individual that I work with is able to do the things they love. All right. And the behaviors, the mindsets, the mentality that you've got right now is you're going down, you're going one way at the moment. And you've got to have the ability to step outside of yourself, look at what you're doing, and assess yourself, address yourself. And as Rini was saying about this, clouding your mind, and that's what we're dealing with all the time. But what we're trying to do here with this podcast and all of our education and all of our coaching is give you the ability as a student athlete, the better understanding, the better education, the better understanding of how to step back, look at your behaviors, look at what you're doing, look at the way you're training, and go, hey, okay, this is excessive. This is too much. I'm not getting enough fuel in right now. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm training, my intensity is too much here. Have I rested? When was the last time I had a rest day? When was it, like all those little things you're not thinking about right now. You're just thinking about training, and training is easy. Like, getting work done is easy. Like, it's thrown around too easy. And what is not easy is your ability to step back and address the other areas of being an athlete or being a human, which is recovery, sleep, nutrition. So much. Am I happy? Like all those things and this is what having a coach or having someone like me and Rini bounce off each other all the time. We have different people that we work with, but those are the variables that you have to start to really, and this is the time to be doing that. Like, this is the time to be really drilling down on those areas and going, okay, where else could I be getting wins here? Not just in training, because training is easy. I know it sounds crazy because it's probably the hard bit, but it's the easy bit. And so we need you to kind of, that's what we want more than anything, is you to be in the long game. We want you 80 years old still running, with your grandchildren. That's the game we're in.
And I think just one last thing to kind of end on is that I know a lot of you will turn around to me and say, yeah, but I don't want to lose my fitness. I don't want to lose my strength. And I know I've had that conversation with you, Chris. And, like, there are very good studies, very, very good studies on both professional athletes, elite level athletes, and recreational athletes. So there's a really good variation in this. So we know this is found to be true, is that when an athlete of any of those levels reduces their training even by 50%, you only lose 4% of your fitness. And that's over a period of 6 to 8 weeks.
Wow.
So all of you that are panicking and worrying about, like, oh my God, but I won't be as fit as I was, that's not true. You may lose a tiny little bit, but you're not going to lose much. And it's about, again, being smarter. It's not, we've always agreed that it's not always quantity, it's quality. And training smart right now is probably the most important way of thinking about the next few months, because at some point you will be able to race again, you will be able to do the things you want to do, you will be able to go to the gym and do the sessions that you used to do, but you want to make sure that your body will be able to respond and adapt to that quickly, so that you can then get the best out of your performance.
Yep.
Right, guys, we're going to leave it there for this week. We're going to come back next week, and we're going to very much talk about coaching the female athlete. So we thought that might be quite an interesting one, not just about like being a female and what that means, but actually coaching the female athlete. What are the things you should be aware of, and how are women and men different? So hopefully a lot of you will still tune in, because I know that the guys might think, oh, well, it's not about us, but actually I think you could still learn quite a lot about how we're all very different.
And how you behave if you're in a group. If you're in a group and you ride with people, you run with people, it's going to open your eyes up to how you can actually support your fellow athletes. So I think it's definitely a unisex. It's for everyone, but it's just perception change. Like I'll be sharing a lot of the stuff I've learned from working with you, Rini, over the last couple of years, like last year or so, and yeah, I've definitely adapted over the years, over the time as well. So yeah, it's gonna be good.
Right. So for now, guys, please stay safe, and we'll be back next week.
Have a lovely week, guys. Train safe.